My name is Priya. I'm a nurse, and I've been working nights at a mid-sized regional hospital for going on 6 years now. I want to say up front that I love my job. The night shift suits me. It's quieter, the pace is different, and there's a kind of unspoken bond between the people who choose to work while the rest of the world is asleep. Most of what I've seen on night shift is just the normal chaos that comes with the job. Code blues, difficult families, understaffed floors. Nothing I couldn't handle. But there was one night, about 2 years into working there, that I still think about more than I should. It was around 3 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday. The floor I was working was a general medical unit, which meant we had a mix of patients. Some were stable, some were not, and most of them were asleep at that hour. I was doing my rounds, checking in on rooms, making sure everyone was okay. It was the kind of shift where you could almost fool yourself into thinking nothing would happen. About halfway through my rounds, I passed by a room that was supposed to be empty. We had just discharged the patient who'd been in it a few hours earlier, and housekeeping hadn't come to turn it over yet. The door was halfway open, which was normal. We usually left them that way so staff could see in easily. But as I passed, something made me stop. I don't know how to explain it. Call it instinct, call it whatever you want. But something about that room felt different. I took a step back and looked in. There was a man sitting in the chair in the corner of the room. Not in the bed, in the chair. He was just sitting there in the dark, completely still, wearing street clothes. No hospital gown, no ID bracelet, nothing. He was looking straight ahead at the wall across from him. I remember my whole body going cold. I stepped inside the room and asked if I could help him. He turned to look at me and smiled. It was one of those smiles that doesn't reach the eyes. He said he was just waiting. I asked him who he was waiting for, and he said, very calmly, that he was waiting for the woman in room 412. That was the room directly next to the one we were standing in. One of my patients was in that room. An elderly woman, admitted 2 days ago, completely alone. No family had come to visit. No emergency contacts that had actually responded. I told him that he couldn't be in this room and that visiting hours were over. He nodded slowly, like he already knew that, and said he didn't mind waiting. The way he said it was flat and unbothered, like my words hadn't landed at all. I stepped back into the hallway and immediately radioed security. I kept my voice even, because I didn't want to alarm anyone. I went back to the doorway to keep an eye on him while I waited, and the whole time he just sat there with his hands folded in his lap, staring at the wall again. Not fidgeting, not looking at his phone. Just sitting. Security showed up within a couple of minutes. There were 2 of them. When they came into the room and asked the man to come with them, he stood up without a word and went with them calmly. No argument, no scene. He just walked out like it was nothing. After they left, I went into room 412 to check on my patient. She was asleep. Everything looked fine. But something made me glance at the window. It was a ground floor room, which meant the window looked directly out onto the hospital's side parking lot. The blinds were open. I am almost certain they had been closed earlier in my shift. I couldn't prove it, but I was almost certain. I closed them and stood there for a second, trying to figure out what I actually thought was going on. Security came back about 20 minutes later. They told me the man had claimed he was a family friend of the patient. He'd given a name when asked, but when they'd tried to verify it, nobody on the patient's file matched. There was no record of him. They'd escorted him out of the building and asked him not to return. When I mentioned the blinds being open, they kind of looked at each other. One of them said the side parking lot had a camera and that they'd review it. I never heard back about what, if anything, they found. The patient was discharged a few days later without incident. I don't know who that man was or what he was actually doing in that room. I don't know how long he'd been there before I noticed. I don't know how he even got onto the floor, because our unit required a keycard or escort to access after 9 p.m. I never found out the answer to any of it. And that, honestly, is what makes it so hard to let go. This is going to sound like the setup to a bad movie, but I promise every word of it is true. I'm Marcus. I'm 28 now. When this happened, I was 23 and working as an overnight security guard at a large storage facility. The kind of place with rows and rows of identical orange metal doors stretching down long concrete corridors under fluorescent lights. If you've ever been inside one of those places at 2 in the morning, you already know the atmosphere. It's the kind of silence that has weight to it. The job itself was simple. I did a sweep every 2 hours, checked that units were locked, kept a log, monitored the cameras, and called it in if anything looked off. Most nights, nothing looked off. Most nights were just me, a thermos of coffee, and whatever podcast I was working through. That was fine with me. I had just moved to a new city and didn't know many people yet. Quiet nights felt like a gift rather than a burden. The night I'm talking about started normal enough. My sweep at midnight turned up nothing. I logged it and went back to the guard station. Around 1:30 in the morning, one of the motion sensors in the east wing triggered. That happened sometimes, usually a rat or a draft from a unit that had been improperly latched. I didn't think anything of it. I grabbed my flashlight and headed down to check it out. The east wing was the oldest part of the facility. The lights in that section were on a motion-activated delay, so they came on in segments as you walked through. I'd done this walk hundreds of times. I knew every sound that building made. I was about 2/3 of the way down the corridor when the lights behind me went off. That also wasn't unusual. The sensors were timed, and if you moved too slowly, you'd lose the light. I kept walking. The lights in front of me came on. That's when I saw that the door to Unit 114 was open. Not all the way open, just cracked. Maybe 6 inches. I checked my log. Unit 114 had been rented for about 8 months by the same tenant. They paid on time, came in occasionally during business hours, nothing flagged. I knocked on the side of the unit and announced myself. No answer. I pushed the door open a little further and shone my flashlight inside. The unit was mostly full. Boxes, furniture, the usual stuff people store. But right in the center of the unit, there was a folding chair. And on the chair was a jacket. A jacket that had not been there the last time I'd swept that unit, which was 2 hours ago. I stepped back and did a slow turn with my flashlight, checking the corridor both ways. Nothing moved. I got back to the guard station and pulled up the camera feed for the east wing. There was a gap. Not a glitch, not static. A gap. About 14 minutes of missing footage, right around the time the motion sensor had triggered. I called my supervisor and reported what I found. He told me to lock the unit, note it in the log, and he'd look into it in the morning. I went back and locked Unit 114. The rest of the night passed without incident. I kept checking the cameras, kept doing my sweeps on schedule. Nothing else triggered. In the morning, when my supervisor came in, he went down to look at Unit 114 himself. When he unlocked it and went inside, the folding chair was still there. The jacket was gone. We reviewed the full camera archive with the facility manager. The gap in the footage was real. 14 minutes, completely black, on 2 separate cameras that covered overlapping sections of that corridor. The maintenance guy said there was no technical reason for it. No power interruptions, no system errors logged. It just wasn't there. The tenant of Unit 114 was contacted. They said they hadn't been in since the week before and hadn't given anyone else a key. They also said the folding chair wasn't theirs. The jacket that had been on it, which nobody had touched, was also not theirs. Neither object belonged to the unit's tenant. The facility added a camera in the east wing after that and upgraded the motion sensors. My supervisor never gave me a straight explanation. He kept saying it was probably a technical issue with the footage, and someone had probably just wandered in by mistake. But he also stopped scheduling me for solo overnight shifts after that, which told me everything I needed to know about what he actually believed. I quit about 4 months later. Not directly because of that night, but I'd be lying if I said it had nothing to do with it.